Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. I'll remind you to join the mailing list just in case YouTube cuts me off. And I send out a weekly newsletter highlighting the top stories of the week. I'm still working on it, but I've sent out 4 and it's pretty fun. We are talking about how I made the point, somebody was saying, I know people who work in the media and they're selfish, he was saying. And I said, is it Rogers or Bell Media that they work in? And then I said, isn't it weird how media companies communication companies own all the media companies? That seems to be something to note, right? It seems to be something we should pay attention to. I think that that's been true for a while as well. We haven't had a governor general since the astronaut incident, right? And you would think a governor general would be important. We have somebody like occupying the space, somebody in the position temporarily until the position gets filled by Trudeau. He's got a short list that will be coming in weeks, according to the Globe and Mail. You'd think you'd have like a running short list, right? You'd think especially with all of the news coming out of the Governor General's office that there were problems, especially if the PMO was the one coming up with the rumors about the problems. You'd think you'd have a list of people that you wanted to put in there. Oh well, whatever. Jagmeet Singh. Okay, in a time when people across Canada and specifically in Ontario, Quebec, have been really upset at hospitals for not allowing them to go and visit their loved ones on their deathbed, and stories in the media about people unable to visit their relatives due to COVID restrictions. You can't go in because COVID, blah, 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 blah. Jagmeet says, in that context, Jagmeet Singh wants us to believe this. Quote from Jagmeet Singh, Twitter, I remember a day during the second wave when I walked through every room in the ICU and all the patients were racialized. It was horrible, and it highlighted the systemic inequities in our society. The fact that you can walk through ICUs at will? Just whimsy through all the rooms? Did you have a little ticker to count how many racialized patients you found and then compare it at the end to the number of ICU beds? My ticker had 58, and there's 58 beds. That means all of the patients were... right? Political hay, but tone-deaf political hay, right? He's trying to reinforce this racist, everything is racist about everything is racist. Like the virus is racist and it goes after racialized Canadians. And Jagmeet Singh is lucky enough to go tour through a hospital and take note of this injustice. Thank goodness we've got the leader of the NDP touring hospitals. Hospital ICUs, no less. And then did he isolate for 2 weeks? Like what? And then I went and checked swabs, I'm a hero, don't you know? What a weird thing to say. Any kind of, which hospital? Which hospital when? Who took you around? Was there a nurse and a doctor who took you around? What kind of PPE did you wear? Did you change gowns between rooms? Did you cross-contaminate anybody? Did anybody get extra sick because you were there? Did anybody in your family get sick? There's so many questions. What a crazy thing to say. My son comes up with crazy. He doesn't know anything about hockey. And my older nephew talks about hockey all the time. He loves hockey. And my brother and I play pretend hockey. But my brother really likes hockey. And so he talks with my nephew and my dad likes hockey. Okay, so my son at dinner the other day starts telling this story about how Tavares, who was the goalie in my son's head, had saved the puck and then hit somebody with a stick. And he's like telling this story and everybody's like, okay, oh yeah, what did Tavares do next? Because everybody was talking about this Tavares hit. Apparently it was bad. And my son's just talking. And it kind of reminds me of this. Just stop talking, Jagmeet. Stop talking. Everybody's just going, oh yeah? What happened next, buddy? Do tell. Oh, and then he turned into a dinosaur? Oh, isn't that cool? Okay. Meet those who destroy Canada. Bill C-15 and UN DRIP. So this is Bill C-15, which aligns Canada's laws with the UN Indigenous Declaration, passes the third reading. We've talked about this for a long time. Mark Friesen has been all over this. If you want to know why it's bad, go look at Mark's Twitter feed today. He will tell you in no uncertain terms why it's bad. You can watch the video of the vote here. It's 10 minutes of voting and their faces flash up on screen about how they voted. Whatever. I mean, maybe it's interesting. I watched it for all of 10 seconds and then I walked away and then saw the newspaper article about it. So here we go. A federal bill to harmonize Canada's laws with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has passed the third reading in the House of Commons. The Conservatives, who have raised concerns the legislation would give Indigenous people a veto over natural resource projects, voted against the bill, along with the independent MP Derek Sloan, a former Tory. Green MP Atwin also cast a vote against the bill after previously saying it was not strong enough, including that it doesn't lay out specifically how UN DRIP would be enshrined in Canadian law. The Liberals, NDP, Bloc Québécois, and remaining two Greens joined forces to send Bill C-15 to the Senate with a final tally of 210 to 118. There are some serious concerns with all this. Do you want to hear a conspiracy theory? Do you want to hear what the conspiracy theorists think that the UN, because it's not just Canada that's trying to get this UN rights, Indigenous rights in. It's Australia, New Zealand, and some other places around the world that behave similarly to Canada, have a similar system. And the conspiracy theory is that they'll use this to limit access to places, to nature spaces outside of the city. And the thing is, they didn't need that. They didn't need the UN DRIP at all. All they needed to do was have COVID, and then they said no Crown land camping anymore because COVID. But that's the conspiracy theory. That's what the conspiracy theorists say, right? YouTube, wink. They're using this as a de facto way to kind of not tie it directly to the UN, but say, oh, because of this UN edict, we can't let you go Crown land camping because you're not allowed access to that land because it's First Nations land. I think it's plausible. I think the conspiracy theorists are sometimes right and sometimes wrong. Remember that whole crazy theory about the lab leak and the Wuhan bat virus, right? I mean, last year, total conspiracy theory. This year, apparently mainstream news. Who knew? A soldier who called on his fellow military personnel to refuse helping with the distribution of COVID-19 vaccine has been charged with an offense related to mutiny, the first time in decades that the Canadian military has laid such a charge. Now, I don't know if they laid a charge in like the 1990s for something similar, but or like the 80s. But interesting that they are using all the tools in their arsenal to punish people who are professionals and step out of line of what they want said publicly about the vaccine. And we'll see in the redacted part of the show, doctors who have lost their employment, lost 50% of their income because they're no longer allowed to work in the IC or in the ER because of the vaccine hesitancy that they're creating. Isn't that wild? Canada. This is in BC. But military soldiers are being charged under military law in a crackdown we haven't seen in decades. That's newsworthy, right? That's something to talk about. So in line with vaccinations of children, I thought it was kind of funny, and people are kind of trying to illustrate the hypocrisy of this, or the ridiculousness, or the slippery slopeness of this. If you believe that 12-year-olds can consent to have vaccine like this injected into their arm without parental consent, then you also believe, right? And then here's the comparisons. Bree says, if children are now considered mature enough to make life-changing medical decisions for themselves, it's time to get rid of the Young Offenders Act and start treating those criminal children like the mature adults they apparently are. And I said, yeah, you've had potentially rent-paying tenants in your 12-plus kids. They've been competent adults this whole time. It just took the vax to show us time to get those kids out and earning their keep, right? We, as a society, said the children should be protected and their parents are their guardians until they are old enough to speak for themselves. The mature minor doctrine seems to be being used to justify 16-year-olds being old enough to give consent. And everybody kind of agrees, like BC's got 16 as the age, Ontario's got no specific age, but 12-year-olds are being told they're too young, and 13-year-olds are being told that they're old enough. It's arbitrary. Who says? Says who at all? I know that there's legal precedent for this, but I think that this is an interesting situation because they're gonna use this and say these mature minors made this choice. Shouldn't they be able to have a say in their leadership too? Right? And I think that again, conspiracy theory. Ooh. But whatever, it is something that only as a conspiracy theory until it happens. And then everybody's kind of like, hey, what about that conspiracy theory? Speaking of, why are no politicians asking questions about the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg and its collaboration with CCP researchers? Let me tell you that if Rand Paul was Canadian, he'd be asking questions. We have spineless politicians. So Fauci has been asked about the gain of function research and his funding of the gain of function research. Can you imagine if Fauci had CCP military scientists in level 4 American labs without clearance, etc.? Well, surprise. Winnipeg had exactly that. Here's May 11th, 2021, Public Health Agency refusing to disclose uncensored documents on Winnipeg's virus lab. As the Public Health Agency of Canada refuses to release uncensored internal documents, a Conservative MP says he wants to know how far Canada's collaboration with China on level 4 pathogens went, and why 2 federal scientists were let go by the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg in January. We need these documents. We need to know what the Government of Canada was doing through the National Microbiology Lab in Winnipeg with respect to cooperating with the Wuhan Institute of Virology in Wuhan, China, Conservative Foreign Affairs critic Michael Chong said during a special parliamentary committee hearing on Canada-China relations on Monday night. The special committee had demanded to know why 2 federal government scientists were escorted out of Canada's only level 4 lab in July 2019, just 4 months after one of them shipped samples to the Ebola and Hepatitis viruses, viruses to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Stories first published by the CBC News. CBC trying to redeem themselves. See, not fake news. We reported on it. Back to this. 2 months after the shipment on May 24th, 2019, the Public Health Agency of Canada referred an administrative matter to RCMP that resulted in the removal of 2 Chinese research scientists, Qi and her husband Cheng, and several international students on July 5th. The committee says it wants to know why Qi and Cheng were let go this past January. The Canadian public has the right to know what the extent of the cooperation was, why these 2 scientists there were terminated, and what exactly happened with the transfer of Henipa and Ebola viruses, and any other workings and goings-on between a Government of Canada institution and this virology lab in Wuhan, Chong said. Despite repeated requests from the committee, the Health Agency of Canada has refused to answer those questions or provide uncensored internal documents, saying it can't release personal information under federal privacy laws. It did provide 271 pages of documents to the committee in advance of Monday's meeting, but much of it was censored. So here's all of the documents you wanted. I just wrote some black lines on it to make sure that you couldn't read any of it. So we don't answer questions we don't like. Sorry, we are liberals, right? And that is how things work in Canada. That's very concerning. Here's Michael Chong asking Patty Haydu. Patty Haydu. Here is Mr. Chong, and Patty Haydu's answer is she takes the time to thank the scientists. Like, instead of answering the very pointed and specific questions that Mr. Chong gives, she thanks the scientists. Very, very interesting. And this is the liberal play. If you see other questions about this kind of stuff, they're thanking the scientists for their work. Like, this is the approved talking point for this question.
Seven government scientists at the Winnipeg lab collaborated with Chinese military scientists and conducted experiments with deadly viruses. One of those Chinese military scientists was actually given access to the government's lab in Winnipeg. How on earth did a Chinese military scientist get access to the government's lab in Winnipeg, a level 4 facility equipped to handle the world's most deadliest viruses? And why are Canadian government scientists collaborating with China's military scientists on deadly viruses?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this question gives me an opportunity to thank the incredible hardworking researchers and scientists at the National Microbiology Lab who have been there for Canadians from the beginning of the emergence of COVID-19 and before. And I will say this about these scientists, researchers, and doctors. They were one of the first in the world to be able to create a PCR test, a gold standard PCR test that led to the ability for provinces and territories to test for COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, we are happy and proud that we have a lab of this stature in Canada able to serve Canadians across the country from coast to coast.
Unbelievable. The worst. She's the Brita of ministers. Just the worst. Feds conceal 992,000 records on the pandemic. Mismanagement. Commons Committee told who in government is responsible. So far, 8,000 pages have been revealed. Lobbyists contacted cabinet seeking contract for his son. Lobbyist won $118 million contract for the client after boasting of getting things done. Former aide and ex-riding president lobbied for millions in contract. Former MP's firm won a $237 million contract before ventilators were even approved, and I don't think they ever even got approved. Montreal contractor receives $282.5 million contract through devices twice failed testing. Failed Ottawa contractor receives $149 million contract after good meetings with aides. Prime Minister made inaccurate claims boasting of preparedness. Agencies instructed to stress success stories and conceal supply shortages. Cabinet considered invoking Emergency Act to seize pandemic-related factory production. Cabinet knowingly shipped date-expired medical supplies to provinces. And more. This is Blacklock's on the response to COVID. And sorry, this probably shouldn't have been in the lab leak, but I'll finish off the lab leak now. I think that it is egregious that Patty Haydu is able to, with a straight face, respond to Michael Chong's question like that. I think that it is unbelievable that we're in a situation where the Public Health Agency is prepping people and politicians for photo ops over actually doing the job, right? They're more concerned about how they look and what the perception of the public is over actually getting doing a good job and getting the right things in place when they need it. Patty Haydu thanks the scientists for getting a PCR test together, but the PCR test, if you're paying attention, and a lot of people have been paying attention, I read an article yesterday talking very clearly about the flaws in the PCR test. And so when she talks about a gold standard PCR test and doesn't include the fact that it's got some serious concerns around its use and the way that the government of Canada is using it in a concerning way, that goes against the narrative. So they're never ever going to say that, right? But she's not being held accountable here. She's just giving you spin. Right? That's it. Spin on the floor of the House of Commons. And this shows how their focus is not on actually delivering a good job, but they're much more focused on optics and getting money out the door to shady companies. Taxpayers spent $100 million. Moving on to the economy, I suppose. $100 million of taxpayer dollars subsidizing the purchase of Tesla Model 3 electric cars last year. Yay! Can you feel the environmental impact, right? Isn't it just, don't you just glow because you know that we're doing something about this? Ontario economic recovery is still on track despite later vaccination start, McNaughton. I said economic recovery. We're 3 weeks away from being open after a month of being closed. Like, we've been closed for a month, more probably. The opening date was supposed to be May 20th. Essential retail only. Right? And now May 20th is blown by with an announcement that, good news, everyone, you can have splash pads and parks back and golf back and maybe some basketball hoops. And then on June 12th, we can open some things. Like, you've been had, everyone. Like, the lockdown was extended to June 12th and they gave you outdoor amenities. It's unbelievable that Dan Kelly, and this was Dan Kelly's tweet, is comfortable typing this. Who believes Dan after a year of doing nothing? He says, "Don't worry, guys, the economic recovery is on track. I've got it on good sources, Scout's honor," right? Sure, man, I believe you. It's parody, right? Oh my goodness. This is interesting. Brian Lilly is queuing up or teeing up Chris Sky to and Chris Sky is an interesting messenger. He's very bombastic. He went on InfoWars. Man, I mean, that takes you got to be sure of yourself, right? And so Chris Sky is sure of himself. And he is an articulate speaker. He has put around him some people who are who maybe want the best for him. But now he's being accused of saying that he wants to kill people and blah, 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 blah. And so there's a legal battle, but that has become front page news. So if you can't attack the person's message, if you can't refute what they're saying, you discredit the person. And that's what we're seeing with Chris Sky. And Brian Lilly is enthusiastically engaging in it. I think if Chris Sky like sees this, and I don't know that he'll see it, but like sees Brian Lilly's thing. Well, there was a guy, Dean Blundell. Dean Blundell went after Chris Sky, and I thought, man, is he doing this for money? Wow, Dean Blundell hasn't been relevant since like the early '90s, right? Like he was the Edge DJ or whatever, the morning guy for a little while after Humble and Fred left, I think, and I think he got fired from there. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But he went after Chris Sky. Chris Sky, like the response to Dean Blundell had like 600 likes, and Blundell's tweet had like 100 likes. And Chris Sky noticed this, and it was funny. But what we're seeing is attack the messenger. What we're seeing is don't believe him because he's an egregious person, and he's an egregious person because we've got him on tape doing X, Y, Z, or whatever. But the thing is, I'm pretty sure that I've had issues before asking where people like The Line Canada and masks, hugs over masks, and all of these little pop-up things get their funding. Who built your website, right? Who's paying you to be in this group recruiting right now? Because they go into groups and they recruit for their thing, which leads me to believe that they're trying to turn people who would be impactful and neutralize them into a group like Hugs Over Masks. Hugs Over Masks is stupid, and just because the name is stupid, and regardless of my feelings on Hugs Over Masks, it doesn't really matter. I just think the name is stupid, and it plays easily to the media usurping that and saying, "Look how stupid these people are. Hugs Over Masks. We're in it for safety." It's easily just dismissed, right? So if now you're a person who is saying we have to fight this, what's happening is not good, you get usurped by somebody who's recruiting, who you believe knows what the next steps are, and you go with them, and now you're neutralized because you get led down the garden path and either repurposed to show up at the line protest or something like that, and now you're not at your protest or not at a protest that's articulating what you want. And have we made any progress with the Line or any of the other pop-up groups? Have there been progress? I haven't seen it, right? Maybe I'm just a cranky old person in my garage, and that's fine. Maybe I am. Maybe it's me. Maybe I question too much. But when people I got told that somebody was attacking me and trying to get me removed from a group. It was a Guelph group talking about the protest downtown. And they were protesting every day, and I was talking to the guy who ran the group, and the person was like, and I said, why? So she came into the group, recruited for her thing, wanted to bring speakers in. And I said, like, hold on a second. Like, this seems a little fast, like, gonna buy us dinner first? Like, who are you? Like, first of all. And like, are you being paid by these people? How much are you being paid? Oh yeah, you work for these people. How did they build their website? Like, who's their developer? How much did you pay for it? Right? Like, there are questions here. How did you get funding? The funding is the key part, because if you don't know who's funding, why would you show up at the protest, right? Like, it's because you might be. Well, there were people in Vancouver that showed up for a free Meng protest. They were paid, and they didn't know who Meng Wanzhou was. And then when they were being interviewed, they're like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm getting $150 for this. Like, it was 15 minutes to stand here and hold this. Like, so it's dishonest. Anyway." Discredit the messenger. That's what's going on here. Okay, do you remember Amy Greer? Probably this is a bigger story than the Chris Sky one. I'll spend more time on this one. Amy Greer is the University of Guelph person who wrote this tweet. And I highlighted this tweet because I was like, man, like, this person is influential in the Ontario Science Table. She's right in there like a dirty shirt with all the people who are closing down the province. Okay? She said this, and this is January 25th at 6:15 p.m. January is typically cold in Ontario. Okay. We have not had a single person in our home since February 2020. I'm currently trying to decide how long we can get by with no hot water. It's that or have repair people come in the house, and my partner jammed into a tiny space with this person trying to fix the water heater. And then it's got the yikes smiley face emoji. And that's not rational. That's not a rational approach to having a broken hot water heater in January, right? Like, it is, to me, the hallmark of a panicky person, maybe, or somebody who's not able to think something logically through, especially in our modern world. How long in January can you get by with just cold water? Do you think? Right? Do you think, like, how many days estimate? estimate. There's a real crisis, and you really can't get anybody to fix your hot water. Are you going to live with hot or cold water for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days? I don't know. She went over the weekend, I think. I think she went 2 days. Anyway, she's the person who wrote this, the injunction. Hold on. Yeah, injunction. This is Rizal Robin. She says, a motion for an injunction to close schools in York Region was served by OSSTF, Teachers Union, on April 12th. Schools across Ontario were closed that day. I've obtained a copy of this motion. It includes an expert opinion by Dr. Amy Greer. This thread discusses that opinion. Okay? That's why I showed you this, right? How could we possibly solve this problem? The only way to solve this problem is to get in the closet while somebody cleans and fixes the hot water heater. Or you could go for a walk, right? You could say, we're not going to be there. Let yourselves in. We'll see you when we get this text that you're done, or whatever. Like, if you're really that scared, there's a way around this. Like, you can think your way around this. Okay, so she's written the expert opinion for the teachers union. Okay, too long, didn't read. Dr. Greer concludes that the only way to minimize risk in schools is to close schools until teachers are vaccinated. Below are a few of the more interesting elements, in my opinion. Link to the documents below. Dr. Greer says scientists are divided on the issue of school transmission. Some say the data shows that spread does not happen in schools. Others feel schools remain dangerous. Is dangerous the same thing as transmission here? If not, what does she mean? She doesn't know if school transmission is a thing, and more strongly, she says there's no way to know. Quote, we have no conclusive data that allows us to determine if schools are hotspots that pose high risk for kids and staff to catch COVID. Is this true? I don't know. Here, Dr. Greer puts forward the argument that hidden spread by asymptomatic kids is impossible to measure. There's just no way to know if schools are dangerous given the available evidence. Greer says that if transmission in schools is low, high rates of community transmission still make schools dangerous. This does not seem an argument unique to schools. If rates are up, isn't everything more dangerous? So we close everything, all warehouses, food terminals, TTC, etc. Greer's affidavit contains the union's scientific arguments to close schools in York. The impact of the motion may have had broader implications. With 2 million kids out of school, it seems the public interest to better understand and discuss these arguments. And also, how did you get your water heater fixed? A lot of cold showers, or like, did you go out on the back porch? It's very interesting. Like, it's very interesting to have somebody putting forward an affidavit like this to get schools closed that's focused totally on COVID-19, but doesn't examine any of the other impacts of closing schools, the impact on families, the impact on the kids themselves, the mental health, the years lost of education, and the impact of that on long term. They know how impactful removing children from school when they're younger is to the adults that they'll become. There've been a lot of studies on this. That's why they took out the OAC and added the early childhood education, right? That's why they brought the kids into schools earlier in Ontario, because of the data that showed that. Now, I'm not saying the data is right one way or the other, but that's what they have been moving towards. That's what they've been pushing. So it's interesting to have this person claim, like Dr. Greer, Mr. Greer, Dr. Greer, excuse me. It's Canada after all, it could be anything. Dr. Greer said, to the exclusion of everything else, schools should be closed because COVID's that dangerous. But other places have not experienced that outcome. Either she's wrong or this is very unclear, but it seems like April 12th is a long time ago, and it seems like we should probably be able to have these conversations without a union in the way, without politics in the way. We should be able to get to the root of this, to say, what about BC? We'll talk about BC in the reopening section of the show. What about BC? They don't have masks, right? Like, it's a very interesting situation to get into, again, when the blinders are on for everything else, when you don't look at anything else and say, this is so dangerous, blah, 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 and then you don't back it up. And also the conflation of the terms, right? Transmission is dangerous, so they're interchangeable. Dangerous equals transmission, transmissible, ish. Okay, an open letter from the Royal Society of Canada COVID-19 Education Group to Mr. Ford, Mr. Lisi, to heed the science and our children, and help our children, I guess, by reopening Ontario schools safely and without delay. And so this is a letter from that group. I'll just read the second paragraph. I can't highlight this stuff, so I have to kind of do it on the fly a little bit. Okay, the evidence is clear, they say in the second paragraph. The Royal Society says in the second paragraph. We're on the cusp of a generational catastrophe. Our professional consensus is that these shutdowns have negatively affected all aspects of child development that extend well beyond the classroom. School closures have impacted the food security of children and youth, the detection and reporting of child mistreatment, maltreatment, and neglect, and have contributed to the widening inequalities and achievement gaps. School closures have also thwarted children's and youth's fundamental need to belong, resulting in greater social isolation and loneliness, and have led to a notable deterioration in their mental health. We have long known that schools are not just about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Schools provide food resources for children and youth in need. They provide therapy for those with disabilities. They're the first point of contact for children and youth with mental health concerns and the most common setting for the provisions of mental health services in Canada. Moreover, educators are the primary reporters of child abuse and neglect. The extended school closures in Ontario have disconnected children and youth from these essential resources for far too long, at a great cost borne to the most promising yet vulnerable of our society. Yeah. Dr. Greer, did you think about any of that? Ontario's top doctor wants schools to reopen before Step 1, which is set to begin on the week of June 14th. Monday, May 31st would mark 2 weeks before Step 1 of the economic reopening, a date the CMOH, suggested would be a good one. And so, again, I say maybe we need to thank Dr. Greer for removing the masks from the children in Ontario and making sure that the steady critical race theory indoctrination and other indoctrination stop immediately. So maybe we should thank Dr. Greer for her hard work. Isn't it interesting that Dr. Greer can override the Dr. Williams, the medical officer of health for the province? Isn't that strange? Her affidavit is stronger than his statement of, yeah, the kids should be in school. Isn't that weird? But anyway, maybe we should say thank you. Maybe sometimes we accidentally happen into something that helps, right? And I think that the closure of schools without a viable backup is not helpful. It's not. But having kids in schools in a prison-like setting with masks and orders not to talk and abusive teachers empowered to make sure those rules are adhered to by hook or by crook. I don't know, man. I don't know. There's a balance, and we haven't hit it yet. And it's a problem. It's a problem because once the kids are back in school, they're going to be masked and they're going to be under that kind of tyranny daily, right? And I mean, I've got a program now, right? Like I've got a program set and running. The province is going to have to work for my business again, and I hope that there's an option for accessing money to fund my children's education, because sending the kids into government schools to be indoctrinated by woke teachers is getting lower and lower on my list of priorities. Reopening, and then we'll go to the redacted part of the show. The reopening is pretty interesting. Reopening is a source of anxiety for at least half of Canadians, says a new poll. Don't believe any of the polls, right? Half of Canadians, half of female Canadians between 25 and 31 in this poll, right? It doesn't matter. They make the stats say anything they want. But I think that it's interesting that they're encouraging this idea that it's anxiety inducing, right? At the end of World War II, people were like, oh no, maybe there will be more bombs. There was like elation and people dancing in the streets and like people were, it was a massive pressure release at the end of that conflict, right? Ticker tape parades and all sorts of stuff. We haven't done that since, have we? Was there a ticker tape parade for Vietnam? Is that in poor taste? I don't know. But the thing is, they're trying to frame this as like this reopening is going to be timid and careful and all of this other stuff. People are fed up and done. Have you seen the parks? Like people walk up to me. Yesterday, I was in Walmart and I saw more people without masks than I've seen in months. Like most of the time, it's people are masked up and they don't give me eyes because I'm smiling, but they try and give me eyes. And yesterday, I was walking down the frozen food section, and a woman came walking towards me, and she didn't have a mask on. She gave me a big smile, and I smiled back because, of course, right? And it was great. Like there were other people, and there was another guy entering, and he came up and he put his shirt up. He's like, "Are you guys okay with this? Could I just have to really run in really quick, and I have to get something." And he had his shirt up, right? And I walked by him and I said, or you can just walk in and say, I'm exempt from this. Bye. And I walked in and he's like, oh, I could just do that. And the person, like the worker was like, no, you can't do that. And I said, I was like nodding, like, yes, you can. And I lost track of him. He was standing there talking to the people. I was like, just do it, man. Why are you asking permission from everybody? Why are you asking permission? Okay, BC's opening plan. Missing in the BC plan, the old normal, says Connie. Yeah, they really don't want the old normal happening. That's scary and dangerous for them. BC's plan is better than Ontario's plan, but it's still tied to cases, hospitalizations, and D1 is a minimum percentage of people 18 plus with 1 dose. Okay, so it's tied to vaccine rates, which I don't like, because what if you never get to 70%? Right? What if you never get one of the conditions is not adhered to, and all of a sudden the whole opening plan is derailed? So I don't like this vax rate. It is coercive. Coercive is against the Nuremberg Code, and I think that it still applies. I think that there are people who fought and died in that war for the freedoms that we enjoy now, and I don't think that we should so cavalierly dismiss the codes and rules that were established after because they were important then and they're important now. Right? And so it's scary to have leadership so single-mindedly moving towards something that is so clearly in violation of those rules that we put in place that were important, that are important. Okay. BC's opening plan. In step 1, May 25th, that's yesterday, outdoor personal gatherings up to 10 people, indoor visitors up to 5 people, organized gatherings are different. So it goes, I'm not going to go through everything because it's too much. Go have a look for yourself if you're interested. CBC Tanya is the link, is the Twitter link, excuse me. But I'll go through this. May 25th is step 1. June 15th is step 2. That's when Ontario roughly starts step 1. Okay, that's when they've decided we're going to get in step 1. Step 3 is July 1st, and that's masks become recommended. And I thought, I didn't think we were going to be getting out of masks that quickly. Really, I didn't think that we'd be getting it, because I thought that we'd never get out of it. I thought that this was it. That was it. So I am glad that this is even on the reopening plan. My hesitation is, well, it looks like we're going to, I mean, people, I think we're at 65% in Toronto right now anyway for people being vaccinated. So the idea of that we're not going to hit the vaccination levels seems maybe folly. People are very willing to get the vax, I guess, which seems odd to me, but hey man, you do you. But having the masks become recommended on July 1st and then personal choice on September 7th, I thought was big. On September 7th, apparently normal social contact is allowed for gathering, travel, Canadian Canada recreational travel. The problem, though, the massive flaw with this whole thing is that fundamentally the return to normal doesn't include a return to normal. The return to normal is faulty, right? It's full of restrictions on Canadians that did not exist prior to 2020. And reopening post-COVID doesn't mean, oh, well, this worked really well, so we're going to keep online school. And like, I'm okay with keeping some things. Like, I really don't like people blowing out birthday cakes. I'll skip the birthday cake. I don't know. I'd rather a candle on your own piece. That's great. Like, spit all over your piece. That I was like, okay, I don't mind this whole thing. This is an okay cultural change. But other things, keeping things that work, okay, fine. But keeping things like capacity limits for cutting down on flu and respiratory viruses, that's not how humans work. And I think that that's folly. I think that that's a mistake. Okay, I think that that's more what I'm talking about is a mistake. People can blow out their birthday candles. I'm not that much of a Grinch, but it just kind of makes me cringe. And especially like young children, like, 4-year-olds who don't know how. My son didn't know how to blow candles out, so he would go like, and I was like, well, that's a great birthday cake, buddy. It tastes great. And my wife was like, yep, I know. Yep. I know. It's a thing. I know. I worked in children's mental health for 15 years. Okay, back to this. Ontario's top doctor would like to see case counts dip below 600 before reopening begins. How'd you get? It's like Lucy just moved the football, right? They just moved the football. We got you again, you suckers. You thought you had a plan, and you don't have a plan. We've got a moving goalpost for you. Mark Toey says, 3-step roadmap to safely reopen the province does not include a step that reopens the province. That's my issue too. The third and final step includes significant restrictions on fundamental freedoms. The roadmap mandates at least 21 days between steps. That means 63 days from the start to finish, end of stage 3. Lockdown equals banning work, closed or restricted restaurants and shops, and lost jobs. Lost jobs is lost wages. 63 days of lost wages cost the average Ontario family $11,000. That's another 17% of an average year's income. That's enough to push those families into poverty. Poverty kills people. How many families must be destroyed waiting for Ontario to reopen? How many more families... that was the end. How many families must be destroyed? How much more suffering is enough before Ontario's government of concern will act? Does the government have a number? It's Miss Elliott. Do the well-paid doctors on the invisible public health table have a number? How many? And really, it does seem very punishing to continue these things when places like BC will be much more open than we will be. Still not fully open, but much more open. The Irv Gastro Pub points out that with the two $20,000 grants the Ontario PC Party has given out as of today, that equals approximately $92 per day. You cannot replace an economy with government handouts. $40,000 just doesn't do it. Sorry, that's a month's rent. Or that's a month's budget, right? And you pay rent out of that, and I don't know, $40,000? I mean, maybe in downtown Toronto it could be. Anyway, so they say with the two $20,000, $92.17 per day. Ontario small businesses employ over 400,000 people, and those jobs and businesses are worth less than $100 per day to Ford and his party. Yeah, for the people, Ontario is open. Yeah, I don't believe it there, Doug. Manitoba says May-long weekend public health orders extended to protect Manitobans and the healthcare system. Lucky you, you've won an extension to your lockdown, right? Yay! Aren't you happy? No, right? That's pretty terrible. Here is an interesting rumor that I heard, and I will share with you with regards to reopening. It seems like the U.S. land border is set to reopen on June 22nd, and certain aspects of it are open already. Now, this is unconfirmed and a little dicey. Allpointbulletin.com I've never heard of, so take it with a grain of salt. However, here we go. While there's been no official word, a highly placed source in the Blaine Port of Entry told local immigration attorney Len Saunders on May 25th that the U.S. intends to unilaterally open the land borders without restrictions between the U.S. and Canada on June 22nd. Another ranking CBP officer, Canadian Border Patrol officer, also confirmed the news independently. It appears to be common scuttlebutt around the regular line officers, both in the Canadian Border Patrol and Canadian Border Services Agency, CBSA. The current border closure order was extended on May 20th until June 21st. The border was closed to non-essential traffic on March 20th, 2020. At the same time, the U.S. also suspended biometric processing at e-safe points of entry for non-essential travel and has extended the suspension each month in coordination with the border closures. Biometric processing requires individuals who are submitting electronic immigration files to go to designated ports of entry for photographs and fingerprints. On Tuesday, May 25th, local immigration attorneys were notified that biometric processing had resumed, effective immediately. Saunders declined to identify his first source publicly, but said he's been highly reliable in the past and is in a position to know. Saunders said the second source is equally reliable. There have been rumors circulating the last few days in government circles regarding upcoming changes to border restrictions, but nothing definite. So pay attention. Things are happening. And Indian cases, yesterday I showed you the Indian guy I was talking about. Indian cases have fallen. And they're continuing to fall. Which is good. That's good news. Good news for everybody, right? Man, there's so much going on. It seems like the reopening plan is a plan, just like Reopening Ontario Act was a plan to keep Ontario mostly closed. The roadmap to opening is equally used to keep us, quiet, sitting in our homes, waiting for them, I guess. And it seems to be working pretty well, doesn't it? I'll be interested to see if the schools reopen. I don't know that they will. I really don't. I think that the union is very powerful. They've got that Amy Greer affidavit, right? So what are they going to do with that? They're going to make sure that it plays as much as possible. This could be just another proxy fight. This could just be something to take up time while the time is burned until the end of the year, until it doesn't make sense to go back to school. I don't know if I don't know. There's a lot of people who seem to think school is going to reopen again. And I mean, Alberta's got kids in schools. BC's got kids in schools without masks. I suppose it could happen. But then, if that happens, then we have to open up. How did they get closed in the first place? Was this Amy Greer affidavit the thing that shut down school for all of the kids? How could that possibly happen? How could that possibly be the case, right? And if it's not looked into, well, how could that level of incompetence be running things, right? If nobody wants to look into that, if nobody wants to do the due diligence and figure it out and then produce a public report to talk about what actually happened and who's responsible for the devastation caused, right? Because it provably did cause upticks in all sorts of stuff. Now, is it just down to the school closing? I don't know. But did the school closing help or hurt, right? Lots of questions. All right, we've got vaccines, vaccine injuries, and passports coming up. So head on over to Rumble or Odysee or BitChute, and we'll do the rest of the show. If you're not following me, that's fine, no problem. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful. Oh, and Greg and I did one yesterday, so it was lots of fun. You should check it out, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.